how do we give folks a sense that they can then believe in themselves, that they can connect here and we can connect there, and that we can change the world for the better?
Thank you for that follow-up question, Chuck. I think one of the first things I'd say is that all of our faith traditions have at their core the notion of empowerment, the notion of the fact that you are sacred, you're special, that God cares about you. Your voice is significant. So I think in part, building off of the messages of faith communities that valorize human worth is a beginning point, is a first step on a much larger trajectory. As citizens of the United States of America, one of the things I've always been motivated by, I was trained in part in organizing under the Saul Alinsky paradigm with the Industrial Areas Foundation. And part of what I learned in that training was that every human being has power. We have agency, and we have the ability to express that agency. We need to begin to recognize that and reclaim our power, because you're right. The world in which we live is trying to take power away from people. It's trying to make them think you don't have a choice in healthcare. What we give you is what you have to take. Not only that, you don't have a choice. We're trying to eliminate your ability to vote in this nation. Voting rights are under attack. But we have to recognize that we do have power, we do have agency, and we can utilize this. And not only that, but that the power and agency that we have is amplified when we bring our voices together. So each of us has our own ability to effectuate change. But when we join with others who have a common interest and common concerns, and we realize that the issues that we find that we are animated by. So we're here today because we're animated by the notion of a desire for a single payer healthcare system. But if we join together with people that are concerned about voting rights, because we're going to need to make sure that voting rights are protected in order to get any bill that we want to get passed. If we join together with people that are concerned with housing, because you know that you can't have healthy people if they're unhoused and they're finding themselves living in the street. And we join with people that are concerned about living wage and making sure that everyone is paid a fair and living wage. Then not only have we amplified our voice in our own silo, but the constituent areas around which we also need to have victories. We're amplifying our voice there. And this is the need for, in this larger day and age, a fusion movement. The notions of intersectionality and fusion, this ability to move outside of our silos, link with others, and work together for greater issues of justice is a larger imperative. I want to say something that's sort of a little bit off script right now, if you don't mind. But I think that this is another reason that we need to work for an issue of racial justice as well. When we think about a lot of people I know, and I'll just use one movement I've worked with, a lot of people, for example, in the environmental justice, climate justice movement have often been hesitant to talk about issues of race. And they said, you know, that's a significant issue, but we're worried about the destruction of our planet. And so let's worry about the destruction of our planet. And then once we finish that, we can deal with issues of race. And the point is, they're missing a larger point. In essence, we need to deal with the issue of race because not only are people being disadvantaged and disenfranchised because of the color of their skin, and that hurts them, that they're living in these ways. Not only are people living in communities, Black and brown folks more likely to deal with higher instances of asthma, chronic disease because of the environmental pollutants in their community. Not only is the issue impacting Black and brown folks, but because the larger attack on voting rights is targeting Black and brown people's votes, and they tend to vote for progressive issues like the issues that we stand for. By not standing up for the rights of Black and brown folk, we are undermining our own power. We're undermining our own ability to have a larger constituency stand with us, vote with us, work with us for substantive change. It should be all of our responsibility to lift up a paradigm for racial justice, realizing that as goes the Black and brown community, eventually goes the progressive community in America. So it behooves us to learn how to work together, to amplify our voices, to work beyond the silos in which we are. And I don't think we really desire to put ourselves in silos. I think the larger systems of the world want us to be in silos so that we don't learn that our true power is the power of connectedness and working together. I don't know. I hope I've at least touched on some of the things you wanted me to touch on there, Chuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thrilled that you expanded the conversation into the larger strategic vision that I mentioned at the top of the discussion here is that we need in this place, in this space, to amplify your shared vision. And you as a board member with One Pair States have helped us to articulate with other BIPOC members on our board. We want to look like America. We want to be truly a value-centered place where people feel comfortable and we can articulate those connections from healthcare to health for all. And health means, as you've alluded, it's about housing, it's about food, it's about jobs, it's about police reform, as well as climate change. So unless and until we connect ourselves, we're not going to have the power to win on any front, I think is what you're saying, if I can paraphrase. So what are some of the ways, maybe just get into some of the nuts and bolts of what does it look like, or what is an effective way to connect again, with communities that may not feel like a comfortable place for some of folks here, but how do we build these relationships? What does that look like? How do we build trust? How do we build connection? How do we get the message out, respecting people's limited time and capacity to do certain things? One of the things we talked about was, I'll stop there and see what your thoughts are on what exactly we need to do.
So thank you. As I think about what it is that we exactly need to do, I don't know where we need to end, but I think I know where we need to start. When we're reaching out to the faith community, I think we need to begin to present our message in a way that has a hermeneutic, a interpretive principle that reaches out to faith communities and make sure that our message makes sense to faith communities. So that which I talked about in my first answer is, I think, a starting point. How do we develop a faith-based hermeneutic that responds to the issues of single payer, the issues of healthcare for all, in a way that resonates in the ears of people of faith? When reaching out to communities, Black and Brown and Latinx and Indigenous American, I think we also need to think about how do we lift up issues of concern for these communities as part of this effort as well. Knowing that African American communities have excessively high instances of asthma, diabetes, heart disease, explaining the way that this will be a mode of building towards equality, utilizing that civil rights language of justice and equality for all, and framing this in terms of the fact that what we're working for is a system where whether you're Black or whether you're white, whether you are young, whether you're old, you can all have equal access to healthcare. Black and white, we know the significant differences in treatment between Black and white communities. But this is a way of moving towards greater equity there. Young and old, we know the significant differences between those who are able to have access to Medicare and those who have to struggle, hopefully finding themselves access to the Affordable Care Act. But many people in the state of North Carolina are still not able to gain access because they fall into that donut hole, that gap where we've refused Medicaid expansion, and therefore they don't have access to health care. But a single payer system would provide access to all of them. So this is utilizing the language of justice for all and framing things in a way that reaches this community would be significant. And this is the same thing for Latinx communities, the same thing for Indigenous American communities, utilizing the notion that we're working towards something that brings us all to a greater sense of oneness. I've been in conversations with of late with a group I work with of people for education on the superintendent's advisory committee. And one of the things that we've been talking about, Christians, Jews, Baha'is, Quakers, UUs, one of the things we've been talking about is that in each of our faith traditions, we have a vision of oneness. There's a notion of that all human beings are valued equally and need to be lifted up in that way. But we don't tend, when we talk across faith lines, we don't tend to lift up that common notion of oneness. How do we utilize that oneness in our school system in a way that helps people to move beyond violence, helps people to think about the significance of not just the white schools in Myers Park, but the Black schools in the Hidden Valley area? How do we use it to talk about moving towards a greater standard of equality for all of us? And I think the same is true for our movement. We need to begin to surface that common notion of oneness that exists in all faith traditions and utilize that as a framework to move forward with. A concept of oneness would want a healthcare system that serves all of us equally. This is what oneness might look like in this way. How do we surface these themes as we move forward? I think those are some sort of nuts and bolts beginning points for this larger work. I think other more tangible, pragmatic steps might be convening meetings of leaders of faith, going out to meet with collections of people of faith in their own context. So instead of saying, we want to invite you all to our meeting, I say, we know that the National Baptists of America are having their convention. Let's go have a conversation with their leaders while they're there. We know that the AME Zions are having their annual meeting. Let's meet with the AMEs. Let's meet with the AME Zions and have a conversation with them in their own context. We know that the Hip Hop Caucus is bringing together hundreds of people to talk about issues of climate justice around the country. Well, what if we went there to talk about the way that healthcare is important if we're going to talk about climate issues? Because one of the reasons we care about climate is because of the way that it impacts people in the larger world. So how do we begin to make ourselves available to enter into the spaces where people, Black and brown people, people of faith, already are present and present what it is that we're trying to do to them directly?